Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Fantasy Facts presented by Fantasy Data. Today, we're getting you set up for week 10 and doing something a little bit different. Hopefully, it'll catch on. I'm calling it a Fantasy Football Discourse, being joined by Josh Bigby, who we will introduce right after we do the drop.
These are the Fantasy Facts with your hosts, Pat Loftus and Seth Keller.
All right, Josh, welcome into the show. You can find Josh at FusionFFB on Twitter. Tell us a little bit about yourself, pitch whatever you have going on, let the people know where they can find you. Aside from Twitter, where I found you.
Yeah, you can just find me on Twitter. I'm there at FusionFFB. That's the podcast, Fusion Fantasy Football. I do YouTube now. So in season right now, I'm doing a show I call Next Week Tonight, where I basically am doing everything everybody does, but I'm doing it like a week ahead of time. So I talk about trades, ads, or especially earlier in the season, there was a lot of, stashing players and things like that. There's been a lot of obviously streamers with all the bye weeks lately. So I'm like talking about, I did week 10 show came out last Friday. So I was talking about people to be streaming this week. I was talking about it last week. So that's the idea. It's next week tonight. So I'm trying to live like a full week in the future, basically. So I was already saying to pick up and start Rashad White in week 10 before all this chatter began about him and Fournette. And I don't know what's going on. But anyway, things like that.
Awesome.
Try to stay ahead of the curve.
Awesome. I love it. And that's really what we're all trying to do in fantasy football is be ahead of that curve. Because if you're behind it, you're probably not doing so hot. Definitely something to check out. Make sure if you're listening, watching, go ahead, give Josh a follow. We're gonna jump into the opening question, and actually, I might switch it up right now. I think I'm going to, but we're gonna do it right now. If you don't have something, it's all right. But it's time to crack one open with the opening question. There you go. Cheers. You know what? I am going to switch it up right now. Maybe I'll do two. Maybe we'll do two. We'll go wild. Because you talked about Rashad White, and I've been kicking over a trade in one of my leagues. I am in a complete full rebuild, complete tank. I have Juju that I got as a throw in a deal to move Jonathan Taylor for 3 first-round picks in Juju. So now I have 7 first-round picks out of 10 for 2023. I have something, I think I have 14 of the first 20 picks, something like that. I have another manager coming to me trying to get Juju. And Juju's still young, so he still fits the mold, the rebuild mold of hold on to younger wide receivers before they hit that peak. He's offering Rashad White and maybe Greg Dulcich, maybe a handful of thirds for Juju. I'm wondering, you're already kind of making me think, like, am I going to be ahead of the curve? Am I going to be a next week tonight if I make the deal to go get Rashad White now? Or do I keep holding on to Juju and kind of say, like, he's still young, he still fits? Because I don't want this to be a long-term rebuild. I want this to be like 23 happens, I completely restock my roster, and I'm rolling out and I'm back into like playoff contention, hopefully championship contention, and like right away. What are your thoughts, Josh?
Yeah, I definitely even play fantasy with like an 18-month window. Like if I can't flip a team around with a rebuild in 2 years, then I did something wrong. These people who have like 3-4 year rebuild plans, I'm like, no, not doing that. I don't even plan out player values beyond like I said, 18 months even.
Yeah.
Obviously, with wide receivers, you can afford to do it longer than that. That's their value. I'm in the same situation, and actually, I traded JT for 3 firsts or earlier this year. Same thing.
Nice.
Do you have any kind of trade deadline? So nothing pushing you to get this done?
Our trade deadline is the end of the month, I want to say it works out to be. I think it's like November 30th ends up being our trade deadline. So we have a little bit of time. Maybe
Okay.
it's a week before. I'm trying to
Well, first off,
I've way too many leagues. I need to make sure I know exactly when the deadline is for this one, but
first off, shame on you for having a deadline in Dynasty.
well,
But
that's
next, I was
that's a,
gonna
a
ask.
hot topic of the league is always there's like 3 or 4 people that are like always adamant, like, why do we have a deadline?
Right.
Let's push the deadline back. It should be at least the start of week 14 when the playoffs, or week 15 when the playoffs start. And then there's the other side. I honestly feel like at one point we have one guy that's just loud and obnoxious in the group, and I feel like the other like half are just like, no, if he's rooting for it, like, I'm just gonna go against it
Just
just
opposite
because
of
it's
that guy.
just because it's that much fun to be the opposite of that.
That's okay. Usually you could push the compromise to be just playoffs. I find that's how it settles out. But either way, I don't know the rest of your team. Like you want to be competitive next year. That means you're going to need wide receivers. So I don't know what other wide receivers you're looking at, or if you would be needing to start someone like Juju.
Yeah. So I have DK. I just picked up Garrett Wilson today. I sold Damian Pierce for Garrett Wilson and a 25 fourth, which I feel like is a nice little return right there. I feel like I pat myself on the back on that one. But
that's fair, yeah.
yeah. The guy is probably the odds-on favorite to win the championship this year, and so he's making the deal to try and secure that by picking up Damian Pierce.
Right.
So,
I am not like a huge Rashad White truther. When I was talking about streaming him next week, it was just trying to find a running back that got targets, basically.
yeah.
But Fournette is getting older. I don't think that the team is necessarily going to be in a position to go all out to win everything. So he could even be a trade away target next year for them. Maybe a little bit of a basically like Hunt is right now. Now that didn't happen, obviously, but everyone was looking for it and waiting for it, and there was talk of it.
To everyone's chagrin, Hunt didn't get traded for fantasy reasons anyways.
Yeah, everyone who drafted Dearness Johnson in the last round of their startups is very annoyed. So basically, I do think that that's at least a fair trade. I would be inclined to wait a couple weeks. It looks like Juju has decent chemistry right now with Mahomes. And I don't know how much of that is just defenses pushing targets towards him instead of Kelsey. I don't know how much of that was him finally getting. I mean, it's been his new in the team. 7-8 weeks. He could easily be hitting his stride and actually feeling comfortable in that offense. So I would really be interested in seeing if his price can't go up in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm also in a spot too where, especially the way this league is kind of shakes out, right? Is that you have a handful of people that are like, they're locked in, they're going for it, they're it. Then you have like the middle pack that is pretty much just been either decimated by either bad luck, bad management, or injuries, which injuries and bad luck kind of go together. But sometimes, and we'll get into in the discourse of the process, some of it is this guy had a tough defense like matchup, and all of these things pointed to them having a bad week, so I put this other guy in who had all these things pointed to a good week, and the dude sitting on my bench drops 20. The dude that I put in my roster gets 3.43. And you're like, come
Feels like a lot of that this year, but
Yeah.
it happens every year, but still.
Yeah. So I'm really curious. Like, there's not a whole lot of room for growth in terms of pick value because so many of the picks have already shifted hands to the teams that are gearing up for the rebuild in 23 or the rebuild in 24. And
The contenders
so,
have all already gone in, and they
yep,
don't have much to give up anymore, I'm guessing.
yep. And then you get the teams that are like that are essentially screwed, that are in the middle, where they paid to go all in. And the guy I traded JT to, JT's been underperforming and with an ankle injury. He also has Jamar Chase, who's out now. He oh goodness, who was he like every week every week his comment in the chat is just the Grim Reaper gif, and it's just Brandon, how did your week go? And it's just the Grim Reaper. That's all it is. It's bad luck, but he's in a situation now where he's given up picks and now doesn't have he has an outside chance of competing. But it stack his team up to one of the other teams, and it's just not. It's apples and oranges. One's way better than the other.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, I was talking about on my episode last week about trading Jonathan Taylor away if you are the contender. The other way around.
Yeah.
Like trade him. I mean, if you really wanted to go all in, go after someone else. Because at this point, he's almost more appealing to someone who's in a rebuild.
Yep. Yeah. And this is more of a redraft thing, but I was talking with another person on Twitter, and they have Kyle Pitts and Brandon Cooks, and he's like, do I drop one of these two guys because they're just being so bad? And it's like that is such a hard decision to make. Like, that is something where that is a gut check. That is like a cojones check. Like, if you're doing that, like, you got to be fully prepared for the psychological repercussions of, as soon as you drop a guy like Kyle Pitts, he's back to scoring 20 points a week. Like, what are you going to get back for that, right? And I don't think there's much on the waiver wire that kind of justifies that switch. But also, if he finishes out the year getting 3, 4, 5 points, how do you not switch him out for somebody off the waiver wire? And again, that'll get into, hopefully a little bit more of the meat of the show of talking about process and results. Because, man, like right now, anybody saying you should be out there working with Kyle Pitts in your lineup, looks like the results are just completely not backing up any form of process there.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say about that. I wasn't big on Pitts as far as trusting him to be reliable early in his career since he was a rookie. And honestly, it's been even worse this year. Obviously, the team has been worse. So it's a tough situation. Obviously I was redraft.
Yeah.
So you got to, I don't know about drop him. I would be more inclined to drop Brandon Cooks. I mean, you must have a really short bench or a really good roster if you're talking about dropping either one of those guys. Surely you've got room to stash somebody else. But yeah, absolutely. I'd be looking to start. I'm not, that was my joke last week when the week 10 tight end streamers was the first guy on the list was Kyle Pitts, actually. A little bit tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
But as if you could just pick him up and start him. But yeah, the joke is, he's still owned. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because he actually has a good matchup in week 10. So this might actually be
this could be the one. This could be or one. He's had a couple. I think he's literally had a couple. I think it's been 2 games where he's been like startable, and then I feel like all the rest have been just very, very mediocre, very not argument level top wide receiver top tight end conversation, which a lot of people were throwing out there. is that Kyle Pitts is the tight end 3 off of draft boards was going to be a huge mistake. He should be the tight end 1. He should be the tight end 2. And yeah. All right. Okay. Anyways, we'll put that down where it is. We'll come back to that. In the meantime, I want to make sure everybody's giving the show a follow on Twitter at the Fantasy Facts. We're presented by Fantasy Data. If you ever wonder where I pull all of my numbers for all my fancy spreadsheets and stuff, it's always from fantasydata.com. Make sure you get on fantasydata.com. They have advanced metrics. They have season stats. They have stats for all different platforms. I focus on football, but they have it for basketball and golf and just about everything else out there. Hockey. I know hockey because I almost always misclick and click on NHL, and I'm like, who are these people? And realize that it's the wrong sport. But yeah, they have everything. Use the promo code FAQS, FAQS. Sign up for a subscription. You'll get 20% off your subscription. All right. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to jump into some news and notes. I'm going to skip the drops because I hate trying to do the producer thing also. But breaking news, something like that. All right. So a few things, mostly positive news. It seems like coming ahead of week 10. Gus Edwards looks like he's expected to play. This is going to be for week 11. So I guess this is kind of a little bit more what you're thinking, Josh, with the next week. But Gus Edwards is expected to play. Dobbins expected back in a few weeks. And these are quotes from John Harbaugh, which is really interesting because Drake played a great game Monday night and has had a couple of really good games. So it'll be very interesting to see what Baltimore does with this backfield when they have Gus Edwards healthy, when they have Dobbins hopefully becoming healthy. The Ravens are on bye week 10, but it's definitely something to monitor and something where if you're a little bit running back desperate, somebody got antsy and cut Dobbins, somebody cut Gus Edwards because if Gus Edwards is a whole lot more cuttable. Definitely some guys that you want to keep an eye on the waiver and possibly going after ahead of schedule before that week 11 cycle starts. Josh, anything you want to throw in there about the Baltimore running backs? I'll throw you a question out there. Is Drake the starter when all 3 of them are healthy?
No, it's going to be Gus again, I believe. I think they're going to be cautious with Dobbins. So, I mean, you say when all 3 are back, but I don't know if they're even going to trust that or rely on that or push it. Yeah. But you could say the same thing for Gus, but I think they're more willing to give him a shot. He looked good in his return, but of course, a re-injury. I don't think you're going to see... Obviously, Drake played great without Gus. Justice Hill wasn't, a threat to that at all. I think that he's going to be put back in the secondary role, though, again. You saw it for a little bit when Gus and Drake were both playing. It's going to, I think, be right back to that. And then, I mean, the Ravens are obviously looking towards playoffs, right? I think they're going to wait and save Dobbins. Yeah.
And we could also see from the fantasy perspective, one of the most frustrating things, which we're seeing with Swift of, he's healthy, he'll be on the field, but maybe the stat was 17% of the snaps this past week, 4% less than 4 percentage points less than Justin Jackson, I think it was, right? And so, for our sakes, just tell us he's not playing. Just be like, listen, for your fantasy rosters, just assume he's not going to play because he's only going to get he's going to be on such a limited pitch count. Let us know that ahead of time. It'll make everyone's life so much easier. All right. Looks like Zeke is going to be back for week 10. I know the Tony Pollard table thumpers out there are going to be very upset because Pollard looked really good, 3 touchdowns in his start without Zeke there. I think we get Zeke back in the same type of split that we have had in the past, where Pollard comes in and takes a lot of the high quality, high efficiency, not high efficiency per se, but the high fantasy points per touch type of touches. And he does. At this point, Pollard has more pop than Zeke does. I feel like I've been defending Zeke for like 4 years now against Pollard, because I feel like every year people are like, oh, he's so much better. He's so much better. And it's like, Zeke is still a better NFL running back because of size and blocking ability, and because of all the whole package that he puts on the field. Pollard is a great asset. And I think at this point, we're starting to get to the point where I think Pollard, I still question whether or not Pollard can be a true workhorse and maintain it for an extended season. Like, I think if Zeke just retired, I highly question whether or not Pollard could take all of those touches. But in short spurts like this, Pollard has been phenomenal. But I think Zeke comes back and they go right back to that same split in the backfield.
Yeah, Pollard did great, but that was also a really good running back matchup.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think he's going to just do that every week. And obviously, you give any running back all the work against a defense like that, he's probably going to have a good game. Yeah. If Zeke was fully healthy and you gave him all the work with no Pollard, I'm not sure he would have had that game.
Yeah,
but he would have had a good game. So yeah. It's a little bit like you said. It's funny because I found myself this year defending Zeke when I was the one warning people last year that he's dropping off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just fighting against the overreactions on both ways, I guess. So if Pollard was going to be a thing, I keep wondering, why wasn't he last year or even the year before? Why now finally, when he's going to be 26 this offseason?
Yeah.
Like, people keep talking about him as if he's the next guy. I'm like, no, like, he's the same generation. He's on his way out too.
Yeah.
So yeah, he has more burst in a role, playing that role. They're a good committee. It's going to be looking just like it was before, which means still, I think, is good for Zeke as a value with Dak back. If they're playing well, they're playing more from the leads. They have a good defense that they've had.
Yeah.
That's more conducive to Zeke, and we saw a little bit of that once Dak was back. But this whole upheaval with early in the season with Cooper Rush and now with Zeke being beat up, of course, did and should have worked to Pollard's benefit. But for the rest of the season, it's going to be back to that committee.
Yeah, and I think the only way that changes is if Zeke has some kind of recurring injury or some kind of setback from the injury, or because even last year when he had the sprained PCL and he played through it, he was still getting significant work ahead of Tony Pollard. It was just not as efficient work because he was playing on a sprained PCL. So, I think that's one of the points of, it could Pollard be the guy maybe for a little while, but if he's not going to take over when the lead back is dealing with an injury and not efficient, and he's still not able to supplant them, can he be in the future? All right. Treylon Burks looks like he's going to be coming off of IR. It's just a question of whether or not, like, he is now past that 4-week stretch. Now it's a question of, does he get clearance medically to be able to come back from IR? And then he has the 21 days for the Titans to activate him. But this could be another thing. If you didn't have an IR spot and somebody got tired of holding a guy like Burks, it may be worth picking up. The Titans passing offense is pretty horrific. So I don't know if this is going to be on anybody's top waiver wire pickup type of situations, but it is worth at least looking at as an option. Josh, it looks like you were just about to jump in there. What do you have?
Well, that's precisely why he should be on our radar. They desperately need somebody out there who can actually catch the ball and make a play.
Yeah.
They desperately need someone out there to do that. And so that's why all the more reason I am actually interested in it for sure. I've been stashing him on IR in one of my keeper leagues, and I'm so ready for him to be back. I need the wide receivers, and also I'm interested to see what he can do. It's a keeper league, and you get to keep him like where you drafted him, and I had a pretty good value on him. So I'm like really hoping that he can do something here.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think because of that whole situation, he's going to get the opportunity, if nothing else.
Yeah, and that's
what more can you want?
That should equate to something. Like out of all the data analyses and stuff like that I've done, the one thing that always comes up is opportunity. It's targets, it's rushing attempts, it's snap percentage. It's another one that I've done that's percent of offense. So like actually calculating how many of the plays on offense ran through that person. And those are always the most correlated pieces to fantasy success. And yes, there's always going to be outliers to that, but you want a guy that's on the field. You want a guy involved in the offense. You want a guy that's going to get looks in multiple ways. And that could be Burks in this offense because, like you said, they desperately need somebody out there.
Yeah, I'm big on using weighted opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a stat where it's basically weighted opportunity team share. So it's nice because the idea of weighted opportunities is the way I do it is that every 2.5 carries equals one target, and one target equals one opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially what happens is you're able to now compare across the flex positions, running back, wide receiver, tight end, evenly on a lot of different stats. I mean, if you're familiar with yards per team pass attempt for receivers, I can do yards per team weighted opportunity and include running backs and compare them head to head with wide receivers and tight ends.
Right.
But that weighted opportunity share, like you said, is absolutely very I mean, it's pretty high correlation to fantasy points.
Yeah, and it speaks back to the opportunity. It's right there. It's right there in the title of the stat. It's all about the opportunities, right? And trying to say like, okay, well, which opportunities lead to higher points? That's where the weighted piece, I'm sure, comes in. I'd be interested to see. Maybe not to take us down too much of a rabbit hole, but I'd be interested to see other ways to kind of weight those opportunities in terms of like red zone attempts versus a regular attempt, inside the 5 target versus on your own 15 target, right? And be able to weight them against the field position down, because one of the things I used to talk about with Tony Pollard is getting third and 15 rushes for 10 yards. Yeah, that's great. He got a point there. He got a 10-yard rush. It looks like he has a great like yards per carry, but he didn't help anybody. Like
Right.
he didn't move the chains. He didn't create a new set of downs. He's that opportunity doesn't actually move us forward any. And so it's, again, probably separating some of the fantasy piece out, because I don't care. He got a screen pass for 10 yards. That right there's 2 points. That's a huge play to have a single play be worth 2 fantasy points. But it doesn't like necessarily help him stay on the field, right?
Right.
All right.
It's not really judging the value to the team offense as well as it is just for our fantasy team.
Right. All right, let's try and keep it moving. We'll try and go a little bit quicker. Speculation that Odell could end up in Dallas. As a Cowboys fan, I have my Cowboys scarf behind me. I have my Cowboys koozie even going on. As a Cowboys fan, I've never been a big Odell fan. If he comes back and looks like Deshaun Jackson did for the Ravens, like I was like, oh, he doesn't look old as sin right now. Like he's not out there with a walker. Like he looks like he's moving pretty good. If Odell can do that, I'm all for it. I feel like the Cowboys could use a little bit of strength in their wide receiver group, but I don't know if it really moves the needle one way or another for me, either fantasy wise or in real football perspective. Anything? Nah.
No, not really. I'm not a huge Odell Beckham fan either. I mean, if Gallup and Noah Brown was doing fine with you with Cooper Rush, if those guys can't get it done, I don't know what. Seems like it's a bigger offensive problem, not the receiver talent.
Yeah, and maybe this is my own jaded biasness, but Odell's not one to necessarily fix an offense. I feel like he's taken advantage of things when he's been in an offense, but he's not necessarily going to fix an offense. All right, Jeff Saturday named head coach after Frank Reich was fired on Monday. People have been losing their ish about this, and honestly, I'm kind of like, you know what? I hope what people are missing to this is that Jeff Saturday is a player's coach, and right now he needs the players to be fired up and go out there and just play a game with like kind of like that reckless abandon, like get fired up, get out there, hit somebody, create a physical presence, move the line of scrimmage. Maybe he has that, and people are going back to, well, his high school coaching team finished like 3 and what. I don't care. I really don't care. My kids' flag football team. I coach our 6-year-olds flag football team. Like my record is, could be phenomenal. I don't care. They're literally who cares, right? I don't have huge hopes, but I want that to be the case. One, just because so many people lost their lid about him being hired. I love when overreactions get blown up. So I hope Jeff Saturday has some success closing out the season for the Colts. What do you think, Josh?
I haven't been super plugged into that, but I mean, how much of the rest of the staff did they get rid of? Was it just Reich and like one other guy?
Oh, good question.
But basically, my point is, I think it's fine as long as Saturday can have a good core of coaches around him to help support him with all the other things that come with coaching that we never even think about, that are really the things that in the long term make a coach good or bad. And yeah, let Jeff Saturday, let him be the cheerleader. I mean, let him get them going. That's fine. I mean, as long as the rest of the staff and the organization around it is the same, then it's just another day. There's not a huge change.
Yeah, and just a quick scan trying to go through it. It doesn't look like they fired.
I maybe really saw one other name listed, but it wasn't like a whole list of the entire staff.
Yeah, it doesn't look like they just went through and cleaned house.
Right.
So
I was trying to remember. It might have been like the offensive coordinator. I thought maybe, but
yeah.
He already was.
No, I was gonna say, I think the only coaching news, the other coaching news was the Panthers. The Panthers D-line coach got fired this week,
and the Colts had already
fired
the offensive coordinator last week.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, that's the one. That makes sense now.
Yeah.
All right. They've already come out and said that it looks like Ellinger is going to be the foreseeable starter for the foreseeable future. I don't know if that really, again, does that move the needle? Probably not.
That is important to me
Yeah.
because you're saying you want to get the team revved up and you want to get out there. How many of the players on that team deep down think they have a better chance of winning games with Matt Ryan? And so how much of that decision alone, that was already a controversial decision that I thought kind of led to maybe the whole thing with offensive coordinator, and now a week later, right? Like how much of that Irsay is happy with, or is he saying, first chance you get as soon as Erlinger looks bad, like get Matt Ryan back in there?
Yeah.
And even if they don't, even if that's not discussion at the top, how much of it is a discussion among the players? And if you want to get them, you want to be a cheerleader and get them all riled up, but meanwhile they're all thinking, okay, but why are we playing that guy then if you want us to try and win?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great
got
point.
Two different messages going on there, and you're gonna have to reconcile those.
Yeah, or maybe there's something that's going on with the offense that maybe even with that though, it doesn't quite fit considering they would have moved on from the OC the week before. But just wondering if there's something with like the playbook that they have, if it's kind of like I don't know what their playbook is, but is it kind of like the classic Gruden example where there's a million different nicknames for everything and it's not as streamlined and young quarterback friendly as a more condensed playbook, and there's arguments on whether or not that's helpful or not, because a more condensed playbook is easier for a defense to get a read on. And so
changing it mid-season. Yeah. That's
and exactly changing it mid-season. Like I've gone through and looked at some old NFL playbooks. There's actually websites that you can go on that actually has the PDFs of the old playbooks. They're massive. Like they're binder fulls of what it actually is. And it legit, like my brain started hurting just from looking at one play and all of the different things that just the running back needed to do. And I didn't even go through the entire playbook. It was just like, this is the difference between the NFL and like every other level of football. This one guy has 10 different responsibilities on one play based on like, when this defense comes out, this is what your initial responsibility is. When this defense comes out, this is what your responsibility is. When this happens, then this, when this and this, and it like I said, there was a whole section that was just looking at one running back for one play. Like I didn't even make it through like a whole set. It was just that one play where I was like, goodness, this is intense. But okay. Now we're gonna go a little bit quicker. Elijah Mitchell elevated from IR, most likely going to be backing up CMC. CMC looks like he's going to have the more than the lion's share of running back touches here. I would hold on to Elijah Mitchell, see what happens. You're probably going to have to take him out of your IR, but I wouldn't be jumping to get rid of Elijah Mitchell the way that I feel like some people were kind of jumping to that conclusion as soon as the CMC trade happened. I would probably hold off just a little bit and just see where things land. I'm not expecting a lot out of Elijah Mitchell, but you never quite know with the Shanahan offense and how he likes to rotate backs through. Again, I don't see that being the outcome, but there's room for that possibility to happen.
It's handcuff season, though. At this point of the year, you know what your team looks like. You know if you're making a run or if you're solidly going to be in contention. It's handcuff season, whether you're picking up your own or if you're picking up other people's. yeah, it's definitely time to get him on the roster. To me, it wasn't the McCaffrey trade that signaled that for me. It was the Jeff Wilson trade to Miami, and that was what triggered me to say, okay, then we need to be picking up and making sure Mitchell is rostered.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And Wilson looked decent in Miami in his first week there. So that could be something to keep an eye on too.
He was on the list too.
Yeah. David Njoku looks like he's going to be back for week 10, which again, good news. He was really starting to come in, finally starting to live up to some of the look at the size and athleticism of this tight end. He must be a great tight end. Womp, 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 womp. But finally, he was finally getting there this year. And it will be nice to see him kind of hopefully finish out the season and see what he can do back healthy and see if he can build off of his earlier season success. And then just real quickly, wow. The Packers season is just, at this point, it's just a punchline. It's a punchline after a punchline after a punchline. Romeo Doubs has a high ankle sprain, probably going to miss a few weeks. And Romeo Doubs is early in the season looked like, wow, he's going to be phenomenal. The first 2-3 weeks, it was like, this guy's going to be good. He could be the not to say the solution to losing Devontae Adams, but he could be the guy that steps up and kind of is the guy you want to own in this Packers receiving core. Then he fell down. The whole offense is just kind of fell down. And now he's out for probably a few weeks. I haven't seen a specific timetable, but I feel like high ankle sprains, they can run the gambit of being an IR possible injury because of the 4-week span there. It'll be interesting to see what comes out this week in terms of where they have them. Aaron Jones was also limping around during the week 9 game, comes back. The tests are negative for an ankle sprain for him, which is great news, but there's probably going to be some tenderness in that ankle. He should be perfectly fine, though. It should be something that they can manage from him. You're probably going to see either limited practices or did not practice early on throughout this week. But it looks like, knock on wood, he's going to be good to go for week 10. And then to add insult to injury, Rashawn Gary is out with an ACL injury for the rest of the season. Wow. Like, obviously, the punchline isn't the injuries. It's just the amount of hits this Packers team continues to take this year and just the underperformance across the board for everybody.
Yeah, and they insisted that Christian Watson did not get a concussion. Last I heard that he had just gotten wind knocked out and they kept him out. He had a concussion the week before that. It's hard to tell what the new ataxia and it's hard to say. But they are supposed to have Cobb back either maybe this week or next week. So that would be an interesting name to look for if you're getting desperate bye weeks or anything like that for a streamer. Because I mean, at this point, who else does he have?
Yeah.
I say that was my reasoning for having Tunyon as a streamer this past week, but that did nothing either. So even given all of these things and all these injuries, he's finally got Tunyon healthy, a veteran that he knows and has a good games with, and still Rodgers isn't producing with him. I didn't get to watch that game really closely. I don't know. Were any of those 2 end zone interceptions targeted to Tunyon? That's all I can hope, is that at least one of them were actually headed towards Tunyon.
I mean,
it's hard to say the way they got knocked out.
The one, he literally just tried floating it over the line.
Yeah, it was weird. It was like back across.
Like that. I'm trying to think of who the receiver
That might have
was.
been
That
Tunyon.
may have been Tunyon.
Yeah.
Just because of like the way the play
Right.
design
Yeah, it
looked
was like
like
he
that was
snuck out from,
probably a tight end sneaking out.
but it could have been one of the other guys. I don't know if it was
Yeah.
Tunyon.
Yeah, that's one of those throws where it's like I feel like I could have made it. That throw was so bad. I feel like I could have made that throw to the defensive end. Like that was not NFL caliber throwing of the
Did you see him
football
after that? He was
right
clearly.
there.
I mean, I didn't watch the whole game. I did see those replays, but yeah, he was pretty ticked off.
Yeah.
The other one just got knocked up in the air, so I'm so early that I have no idea where it was going.
Yeah. That one.
But anyway,
That one went right off the
so
line.
I'm not sure whether even taking the shot and thinking, oh, he's got to use somebody. Well, maybe no. Maybe they just are bad.
Yeah. I have a couple Packers fans in my life, and as much fun as it is to poke the bear, like I think that's part of what it is. I think the Packers they're just in a really bad spot right now. And for a while, it was like the only person I feel comfortable starting on the Packers is Aaron Jones. And that's because he should be getting 5 to 10 targets a week because they have no one else to catch the ball. But all right, that was news, notes, updates. Definitely went longer than anticipated. But that's all right. It doesn't bother me any. Does it bother you any, Josh?
No, it's fun.
No?
I don't get to do this stuff.
All right. So what we're gonna do next, we're gonna jump into the fantasy discourse. And so a little bit of background is myself, Josh, and at Swagzilla, right? I think I got his name right. I have to go back and now look at it.
I don't even know. He's changed it before. Shane Swagger over there.
Yeah. We're in a Twitter conversation, which surprisingly, and especially on today of all days with all the crazy political stuff going on back and forth amongst both parties, we actually had what felt like a fundamentally well balanced conversation on Twitter about fantasy football without anybody really like losing it, which I don't know. I feel like it's such a shock, but I wanted to continue that conversation. I wanted to push it a little bit further, and it just worked out beautifully that Josh is available tonight to be able to jump on the pod, and we're able to kind of have this fantasy discourse around process versus results. And so, again, a little bit of setting the stage. The original tweet talked about results being important. And when the result doesn't match up, you don't get to just go, well, the process was right, but I just got it dead wrong. And I want to start with that. I want to start with that first statement, because that's what led us down the rabbit hole that we had that eventually led us here. I want to start with that. What's your kind of initial reaction to that first statement?
Well, me and Shane even have history on this topic before. And as far as how the discussion went, I don't know if I actually made it worse or better when I jumped in onto yours. But me and Shane go way back. He was actually my first podcast appearance was on he and another guy, Jason's earlier podcast they had. I don't know what that was, 5 years ago or something. So yeah, we go back. We play in leagues and different things. We've had our spats, but we also have still chatting. We're good. So I know from that experience that we think very differently and express things very differently. I always have to be careful because we talk past each other very easily sometimes, which is part of the reason I appreciate his perspective on things so much as well. Yeah. Because he's very good. He comes up with very good results, and I don't always understand his process. But at the same time, we've both attacked and made fun of this before, where people saying process over results, And I'm joking around saying, okay, but if your process keeps giving you bad results, then your process might be crap. Like maybe it's not good. And I've broken down this topic before and talked about it. Do you have a actual whiteboard like sitting around that you drew? Yeah,
Yeah. I saved it from earlier.
That's
Let me get
brilliant.
that.
That's awesome.
Let me get that in the frame a little bit better.
That's
Yeah.
some
Here we go.
data viz there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the 4 like quadrant visualization of something I came up when I was thinking through this last year, not this summer, but the previous summer, about the same process versus results. And I've before made reference to it and saying, especially actually it was the Kyle Pitts thing, before it was the summer of 21, before his rookie season. I kind of did a recap of things that would happen and little predictions of, oh, this player is not going to do as well as he did. And actually, there's a lot of good things in that thread. But one of them was that the Kyle Pitts is not going to be what you want him to be. But a year from now, the Kyle Pitts people are going to be saying, oh, I know it didn't work out, but process over results.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wanted to preempt that specifically in that case because I felt like they didn't have the process to stand on to claim that. Yeah. So yeah, I knew exactly where Shane was coming from, where the process and the results are hitched together a little bit more for him, and saying, and I kind of in my mind kept picturing like Bill Belichick press conferences, like post game, and
Yeah.
and the reporter is trying to ask him about some hypothetical, and Bill Belichick just has a just blank expression on his face that he just I'm a Patriots fan. I've watched enough times that I really think like that's just not how Belichick thinks. Like he literally, this is a nonsensical question. He really doesn't understand it.
Yeah.
Like that's not how he thinks. His method, his coaching, which clearly works. It's not a fan or reporter mindset, but it is a winner competitor mindset. Like this is what we're going to do. There's no second guessing. Like, no, you just have to do it.
Yeah.
A little bit of that, I think, from Shane saying, look, if it didn't work, like it didn't work, just admit that it didn't work.
Yeah.
And fix it. Now, where I come in, because I'm the analytical like mind, I like to break things down. And he's saying, well, that's more difficult. And I'm saying, no, to me, that's easier.
Yeah.
To me, I break it up into pieces. I can check them off now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have this big amalgamous thing that I have to figure out where it went wrong.
Yeah.
I like breaking it up. So basically, I don't think he's saying that results are the only thing that matters. He's not splitting it up and then saying results matter. He's just saying, look, big picture, stop saying you were right when it didn't actually happen. And there has to be an element of that. Even in processes that I am confident in, 90% of it was right. You still have to say, okay, but there was this one part that wasn't.
Yeah, no, and I think I feel like there's two aspects of that also, right? There's the I gave you this advice and it didn't work out, but I was still right because the process was right, even though you probably lost horrifically because the player that I told you to play was just awful. Like there's that self-preservation piece that I completely agree with Shane. And saying like, yeah, there's times where like, no, you got to hold that L, hold it close, experience it, live with it for a minute, and hopefully you like take ownership of it to the point of saying like, why do I have this? Was it the 1% chance out of the 99 that it was going to happen, or did I provide bad process and got the bad result, which is actually very well aligned. Bad process should lead to a bad result, but it doesn't always. So I think there's that level of self-preservation, and completely agreeing with own that miss, because the only way that you can get better is by identifying where those misses happen, and really exploring all four of my wonderful two-way chart, the four quadrant chart there, because there's times where like your process is bad but the result was good, and too many times we overlook that because, well, I may have told you to sit, this player, or I may have told you to start this player, but for all the wrong reasons, and they fell into the end zone twice. So the fantasy day looks amazing.
I'm a genius.
Oh, I'm going to overlook everything else. And that was my Brian Robinson take. When Brian Robinson had his first game, I was like, he didn't look good. I sent out a tweet. I was like, be prepared for all the Brian Robinson truthers to tell you about how great Brian Robinson did, just looking at the fact that he scored a touchdown, and in the fourth quarter, with almost no time left, ripped off his biggest run by like 8 times what all of his earlier runs were at a 16-yard run. And I think a lot of people did that. And now we're living in maybe Brian Robinson isn't the answer that we all thought, that so many people thought he was going to be.
Isn't it crazy that it took Brian Robinson getting shot and coming back 4 weeks later for the team to finally realize how to use Gibson?
Listen, man, Gibson has made me second, triple, quadruple, quintuple check myself, because it's like it was all right. I think Gibson's gonna turn out all right. Like there was people that propped up Gibson so much, and I was like, but hold on a minute. Like he has that stuff, but he doesn't get used in that way. And then it's like, but it doesn't make sense. But then he's finished as a running back, an RB12 and an RB14 or something like that on the season. Yeah. Even his points per game, I don't think they perfectly match that, but I still think they were like top 20 in both of those seasons. And so it's one of those things where like people are like, oh no, he's going to be amazing. He's going to be amazing. He's going to be amazing. And it's like, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, he's going to be dead. Just the dead season. Get all the dead gifs. Get the dude jumping in the grave, pouring dirt on him. And it's like, what? Wait, where did we? How did we go from there to all the way over here in no time? And he's, especially this season, it's been this constant back and forth of like me reassessing my own understanding of this player because of how he's being utilized. And like you said, why are you just now realizing like, hey, maybe we should run like a swing pass to him, or maybe we do like a misdirection. We do like a misdirection, and it almost kind of looks like a tight end screen, because he's not all the way out there, but he's like still has blockers close by, and it looks like a tight end. Like, why did it take all of these steps to get to using him in this fashion?
It's almost like Rivera's like first item on his list is running back that runs right down the middle.
Yeah.
Like that was the first thing. And when everyone else was out, Gibson was pushed into that.
Yeah.
And now that Brian Robinson can do that, now that's freed up Gibson to do the fun things, the high, the good opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually it was a week after that. My next week tonight for Brian Robinson was sell him. And my note is simply, great story, but he's just a guy.
Yeah.
And you're right, because both the Gibson and the Brian Robinson, it was a really tough case of like what we're talking about, your process of how much of my priors am I going to hold on to?
Yeah.
Because my evaluation on Gibson, going back, was, and I was not one of the guys on him right off the bat or anything like that. I was a slow comer to him. Actually, I think the time I finally switched to being like, okay, yeah, he's the guy, was when AP made the comment that the coaches want him to be the guy, and I was like, okay, if the other running back player veteran is saying that, now I believe it. I believe it. But at the same time, Brian Robinson, like, good player, but a little bit like lesser Najee Harris. And we're seeing what I also kind of saw about Najee Harris being his issues coming in, that without all that volume, it's not amazing. And so I'm like, that's just lesser of that. That's nothing great either. And so there was a little bit of how much am I going to hold on to that, and how much of it is, confirmation bias. So you're struggling internally with all of this in your process. And am I really being fair about it, or am I just kind of holding on to my old take and wanting to be right? And it's tough.
Yeah, and you brought up the term confirmation bias, and I think what we really have going on here is another heuristic called anchoring bias, and that's when it's take lock is what we call it in the fantasy fantasy industry. Is that what we get to call it now?
On the Twitter streets.
Yeah, on the mean Twitter streets, it's anchoring bias, and it's saying like, this is my take of this guy, and I'm gonna hold on to it, tooth, nail, claw, and I'm not gonna let go of it. And I think that's one of the things that I was mentioning with my Gibson take was I had to reassess my own take of the player multiple times because of all this stuff that's coming out. And then and part of that process piece of saying, like, what is the news coming out? Take the AP quote. How strongly does that factor into my understanding of this? How strongly do I factor in the amount of touches they're getting? What those touches look like? How is that offense as a whole functioning? And there's just been so many different phases of that for Gibson, and that's just in this year. That's not even looking back to the 2 years prior, where some of those things popped up as well, but not nearly to the extent that it has from this offseason to where we are currently, of him actually being used in the offense in a way that I feel like people have kind of wanted him to be used the whole time. So I definitely think that anchoring bias is a larger part of it. But I think to bring it back to a little bit more of the original topic around process and results, I think there's a level of not just the holding the misses, but also the way in which advice can be given out on Twitter. And I think that's also part of what Shane was getting into in the original discussion. And it's something that it irks me to my core when people just come out and just say, here's 7 must-start running backs. First of all, there's only 2 running back positions in most lineups, and usually only 3 or 4 in a deep league of flex positions. Like, I can only start maybe 5 running backs tops. How can I start 7? Sorry, that's my joke, is semantics and being really upset about the fact that, like, who's starting 7 running backs? Nobody's starting 7 running backs. But anyways, like, 7 running backs you must start. You got to play them no matter what. It's those definitive takes that I feel like make it easier to say you're wrong. Take it. Take the fact that you're wrong because you said something so definitive that you left no room for error. You left no room for uncertainty and randomness, which I feel like anybody who's been watching sports for long enough knows there's always room for randomness and uncertainty. That's what makes sports, the greatest form of entertainment and drama, at least in my opinion, is because you never know what's going to happen. You never know that time the marching band's going to come on the field. You never know, and it hurts me to say, but you're a Patriots fan, but whatever. You never know the time that the team's going to come back in a Super Bowl down 27-3. You never. Like, yeah, we can calculate odds for all of that, but all of those odds are based off of prior history and not necessarily on the limit, because we don't know our forward limit of it because it hasn't happened yet. So anytime somebody's coming out and saying, this is a definitive take, you must play this, this guy is a guaranteed stud, this guy is guaranteed to be this, that to me puts me off right away, and just like, I'm going to poke holes in this because that's to steal the Batman gif. Some people just want to watch the world burn. What's your take on that definitiveness, and how that plays into the argument of process versus result? Question mark. I was going to say something.
I always assume, yeah, insert question mark. I always assume, I try to be charitable. And so when someone says, oh, this guy's going to be a top 10 running back or something like this, I always, and actually, funny enough, me and Shane had this conversation, but I always insert in my mind, in parentheses, I think he's going to be a top 10. I think we should just do that for one another. I mean, there's limited characters on Twitter, like you're trying to get your thread out, whatever. I understand that everything you're saying, no matter how confidently you present it, is still your opinion. But what's lacking is, in your example, and it happens a lot, is these simplistic presentations, and it's very old school media where there's no explanation of the process. So you're just giving what you think the result will be. You're not actually telling us how you think it's going to happen. See, and that's why I say I try to break it down, this whole discussion of process, because to me, a process is both how you collect and integrate the information, and that is hopefully consistent. And then you have to, and those that's just data and facts. And we got to that point at one point in the discussion, but like the analytics, the data, the metrics, whatever you want to, even if you're a film guy to some extent, the observing of film, those are all just raw information and data. Now, where are you going to go with it? Now, what conclusions are you going to draw? What weight are you going to give what things? And then what predictions are you going to make based off of that? All of that together is, to me, the process. And there's a lot happening there. So that's why I say it's so hard to say someone your process is flawed. Well, if they didn't tell me anything about what they were doing along the way, maybe they had bad information. Maybe they were weighting something really poorly. Maybe they were looking at something completely irrelevant. I don't know your process. So if you're not going to give me any process and you're just going to give me what you think the results are going to be, I have no choice but to include that all in one, like Shane was saying. And so if you're wrong, then your process was wrong. Because unless you can tell me where, I have to assume somewhere in there something was wrong. So as a whole, it just takes one little bit to make all of it wrong.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really solid point of thinking through the process. And one thing that I find humorous at times is the film versus analytics debate, because the analytics are created based on the film. Like, missed tackles is somebody watching film and going, that's one. Like they're one and the same when you think about at least the base of it. And then I think the larger argument then gets into process of, well, how do you go about using that base piece into creating the models, and if you're creating rankings or if you're creating lists and things like that, to say, this player is going to be better than this player. All right, well, where's that coming from? What justification do you have to do that? And so, the reason why I have the whiteboard is because I've been an educator for like 15 years. And during the pandemic, I was just like, I'm going to need this, I think. And let me grab some of these. So I grabbed a few of these whiteboards. And, one of the things with doing that, and I've coached a lot of young educators as well, I've always said, you need to have a rationale. You need to have a reason why you are doing something in your classroom. And so as long as you can say, here's why I did what I did, then we can talk about it, because then we can talk about, okay, you chose to do this because of this, but here's where we can change that. Here's where we can make these adjustments so that you can take the next steps and you can grow as an educator. I think it's the same thing with basically any profession, hobby, skill, anything that you want to improve on. You have to be able to say, well, I did it like this because this is the end result I was looking for. And that's where I don't think we'll ever get to a process against results discussion. They're always going to be intertwined in some way, shape, or form, because your process is always trying to get to some kind of end result. And then you're matching up. Well, I thought it would go like this, but in reality went like this. So how close was I? Okay, let me go back and revamp. Now try it again. Oh, I'm a little bit closer. Let me go back and revamp. Let me try again. And I think that's one of the things where we can, it may be a good kind of ending point, and I'll let you get the last word in here, but it's thinking about how do we convey that rationale? How do we convey that process to help others kind of understand where we're going with it? I do like the plug of like, put in I think, and it'll make life a little bit easier. I agree. I try to assume the best of everyone, but it's kind of hard when you're like scrolling through Twitter. It's like, good, another one of just like, this is gonna happen. It's like, no, it won't. I guarantee you there's room for where this won't happen. Like that's not the way the world works in definitives.
Those absolutes, it's impossible for, oh no, you're already wrong.
Yeah, you're already wrong.
I just, when I'm defending my take, and that's the thing. I mean, that was what Shane was pointing at is, right, if I'm going to defend my process that had a bad result, mm-hmm, I need to be able to say, well, it was a good process, but it didn't work because, and I need to be able to point directly to where it went wrong. Yeah. And it maybe your process was right, but it was an injury. It was something that was a factor you can't control. That's fine. You can still point to it and say, look, it was on track. It looked like it was going to be fine, but he got hurt in the third quarter for second quarter. And, but up until then, he was pacing exactly what I thought. Yep. Okay. Then you can say you had a good process because the results, as far as we could tell, were in line. But when you cannot point to what exactly went wrong, then you can't fix it. And to me, that is the biggest part, especially all this talk about accountability and people pulling receipts and everything. To me, the biggest part is it's not about holding someone accountable as if like I'm a paying customer or something. I mean, mm-hmm, maybe they do have some, but it's not me. But it's more about, I want to know that you're actually working towards improving. Or are you just going to keep making the same dumb mistakes over and over again, even though I keep telling you that's a mistake? Yeah. So that's really what I want to say and want to see is people, like he was saying, own your mistakes, own your bad results. look through your process, see, what you need to get rid of, also what you can keep. And it can be very, very subtle differences. I think back to, and I have a whole podcast. I mean, it was in January with what I do with being ahead. By the time I'm done like after Thanksgiving with that show, basically. So you're only going to have a few more episodes because it's like at that point, there's no point. I almost start like getting into Dynasty ahead of time. So last January, I'm doing like cold cases on my own takes already. So, and one of them was Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. And I was wrong.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to benefit Robert Woods more. And I go in that episode, I went all the way through and I talked about it, and I identified what I missed. And the majority of my process was correct in at least how Stafford was going to improve the offense and so on. But I missed a few things, and I ended up putting that towards the wrong guy. Yeah. And so the difference in the results is massive.
Yeah.
Especially when Woods got hurt then.
Right.
Which you can't do anything. But even before that, the production just was not anywhere close to the same.
Yeah.
So that little bit of just, I missed this, can have that big a difference. And so 90% of the process can be right, but you miss that little bit, and that's all it takes. And so you need to be able to identify that. We need to be able to own what we got wrong and show that we're actively trying to fix it. Because if you're not trying to actually fix it, if you're not actively identifying those things that you got wrong, then you can't fix them. Yeah. Now, here's a positive. We'll end on a high note.
There we go.
It gets forgotten because there's so much emphasis in, you need to look at your misses and to see what you got wrong so you can fix it. Everything I just said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's what gets forgotten that I think we need to remember. We need to examine our successes as well. You got the 4 quarters, right?
Yeah.
If you're hitting on something, you need to know why you were right so that you can be right again. Yeah. Because if you think about it, you're a whole season ahead in the process then. Because if I'm wrong, you're telling me I need to fix my process. Okay, but I'm not going to know that whatever I'm doing to fix it worked for another season.
Yeah.
But if I have something that actually worked, then I can put that into place right away and try to profit from it this season. So we need to examine our successes as well and be honest with ourselves why they worked and if they worked. It's far too easy, like you said, hey, I'm a genius, to claim success. And that's why it's important to break down and know the reasons why, like you said, know the reasons why you thought what you thought, so that when it happens, you can say, okay, did that happen for the reasons I thought, or did it just happen for some other reason? And I can't claim, that it worked. And so there's two, and I said they were lucky and unlucky, but really they're indeterminate. It's data that you can't claim one way or the other. So on a positive, if you have something that's working, or maybe you just keep getting lucky, right? Maybe look into it a little deeper, spend a little time, figure out, why are you getting lucky? What is it in your, internal calculations that you were accounting for or seeing, or something that was leading you to that conclusion that seems to you consistently get right? And there's people out there I know who always are really good at running back evaluations, or really good at wide receivers. And that there's just something in there that they've got that they've cued in on. Yep. And how much better could it be if they identified those things intentionally and could apply them? They could get even more right. Right.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a massive piece of it, is trying to figure out. And that's why I was saying, before, you don't want to just examine one thing. You want to examine every part of the quadrant and figure out why. Try and figure out why, without falling into a narrative fallacy of trying to put a story to everything, because sometimes it's, hey, everybody was just wrong on the way this one shook out, the way this game script was. There was no precursor for it, and to try and expend too much energy in it will take us down a rabbit hole full of data noise versus worthwhile actual information that can help us out in the future. There's a really good book called Black Swans that talks about the level of uncertainty that we don't know, and trying to work that into what we're actually doing with our process. And again, that I'm like probably 90% done with the book at this point. And that's one of the major theses of the book, is just around, like, we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know to what extent we don't know it. And so like, when we're creating these models, there's always going to be a room for error because of that space, that gap of space that we don't know about. And so I think that's the part of, yeah, we can identify, like, hey, we got something right here, and it looks like we got it right because it falls into this space where we're able to identify these things. But there's always going to be that other space where, hey, maybe it just fell into that one and we got lucky by that happening, serendipitously for us. And again, I don't think that's a negative thing. I just think that's one of those things where it's like, we won't always know, right? And that's where I think, being wrong is, like, yeah, everybody has the opportunity to be wrong, because there's always going to be that space that we don't know. It's not like flipping a coin, where unless you get some miracle of physics and the coin lands on its side, it's going to end one way or the other. Real life doesn't function in that way. And so we can't apply the same probabilities and statistics to it. You look like you were going to throw one final thing on that.
No, it was more a thought, and you just touched on it, where you won't be able to as easily be objective and not take things personally and everything. If you don't, to me, the way I do that is the taking of my process and everything, and taking it as something outside of myself that I can really look at. And that allows me to not take it personally. That allows me to more easily change it, to not get bonded to it and take it personally so much. And also allows me to take criticism on it better. So really, that's another important thing, is not making your takes aren't you, they aren't part of you. So if you can set that away from yourself, you'll better be able to examine and change. And that's something all the time I struggle with, is, and I came up with a name of it because it happens so often, where there's boomerang players, I call it, because 1 year I'm on it, and then next year I have to completely flip around the other way. It's like a Zeke Elliott, or there's been lots of players. I'm about ready to do it on Najee. I was all down on Najee, but now, like if you're telling me the value is that low, maybe I'm gonna have to flip around the other way.
Yeah,
he's got a great schedule coming up. Like maybe I'm gonna go the other way.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be able to do that and not have take lock, like you said, or anchor, or whatever we want to call it. You're not going to be able to do that if you're thinking of that take as somehow tied to you.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We are at like a minute. We are at multiple minutes. We're about the hour 22 mark right now. We're gonna push off the fact attack. But what we're gonna do real quick, I just want to, we did get a comment in here. I want to throw this in here real quick, because we've talked about both of these guys and we've brought up the names multiple times. So shout out to Justin Hart. Throwing in the comment here, would you rather have Gibson or Zeke? Not much other context here, so I'll let you go with dealer's choice, redraft, dynasty. How do you see these two?
I mean, either way, almost. I'm tempted to just say Gibson. Definitely in dynasty, I think he's got a future in the NFL, even if it's not in Washington. And then I think the other thing is, I just have to check here. I'm trying to look up rest of season here. Yeah, it's not bad, especially in the coming weeks for Gibson. Playoffs are a little bit rough until the maybe your finals, but it's not great for Zeke either. So it's pretty much the same. I'd rather have Gibson. He's got that more explosive nature to him. He doesn't have the injury aspect that we don't know how bad it's going to hold Zeke back and
Yeah.
slow him down. So just that uncertainty aspect of it, I'd rather take the upside of Gibson.
Man, I
PPR
want.
obviously.
Yeah,
You
I
did
was
say
gonna say
PPR in the other
if
comment, so I'm going PPR.
yeah, I would say it's probably Gibson dynasty wise, even though Zeke is 27. I think I just saw when I looked it up real quick. Um, so he's definitely like past that age cliff for running backs, and it seems like the injuries are starting to pile up. It seems like there's not quite the same burst that he had, when he was 22 and basically bulldozing through everybody. Um, Man, it is tough to say right now in terms of redraft just off the cuff because Gibson has been being used the way that we want him to right now. But is this now the end of this quarter of the season for that production and now we're going into another phase? I don't think so, but it's just one of those things where it's like, man, they were so quick to flip him from one to the other. What like where do we see the Commanders moving forward? I think I agree. I think I agree with you that Gibson definitely has the most upside here because if they can continue utilizing him in a productive manner, especially in PPR, I could really see him having the higher ceiling. I think there's something to be said though for Zeke. Like he almost never has a below 10-point game just because the volume is consistently there. Whereas Gibson, he can disappear in a heartbeat. And it could be exactly like we've been talking about with the process here versus results. It could be one of those games where we're like, this looks like a Gibson game. I think we could all sit around the table and be like, this one, yep, that's the game. This is the Gibson game, and then poof, gone. And because of game script, because of play on the field, because of a fumble, maybe like it doesn't even have to be an injury that makes that poof happen. So I think it's a little bit of I agree a lot with Gibson, but I think there's a couple instances where I think Zeke makes my team possibly better because I know like I can keep him in my flex, and 9 times out of 10 I'm going to get a 10-point game out of him. It's not going to be pretty, but he'll give me 10. Whereas Gibson will be 1 point, 2 points, 10 points, 20 points, 5 points, 11 points, and it just the constant fluctuation there where across the long run, does Gibson win you games because of those handful of pop games? How many of those handful of pop games do you get? And then how many of those dud games do you get? And I think that's the question that is so much easier to answer after the season, when we can kind of go back through and do those cold cases on the results. But I think that's where my mind is at with these two. So not a definitive answer, but I think more times than not, I think I would go with Gibson over Zeke, but Zeke definitely holds that floor opportunity for me. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I'd want Gibson in the flex because he can pop off like that. I tend to be one. If I have a couple flexes, I want high upside guys in there.
Yeah.
If you're like the big, solid roster contender and you just need a backup, especially with a few more bye weeks here and everything, then I can see Zeke being the best pick for your specific team. You need that steady guy that you can put in, get 10 points. The rest of the roster is going to do their job. I just need you to do your job. I can see that. But if you're trying to get into the playoffs or as a wild card, then I'd rather take a shot on Gibson.
Yeah, because you have if you get 10 points and somebody else on your team flops, you're out of the playoffs anyways. Where at least if Gibson, if he pops and gets you, a 25-point game, now I got a shot. Now I might be in it. If the rest of my team has, some solid plays, I might be able to upset somebody in that wild card spot. And I think that's, again, I would love to be able to say, like, this is what you should do in all cases, but it doesn't. That's not how this game works. But all right, there we go. That's the show, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you stuck with us throughout the whole thing. I think there was a great discourse there, especially around the process and the results and just the way that both Josh and I kind of look at different aspects of fantasy, of the process, and how do we get to where we get to. And it's not to say that other people aren't doing it, because I guarantee you they are doing it. But that's something that I would encourage anybody out there kind of listening or getting into fantasy or trying to figure out, like, I only have so much time to listen to a podcast or to this or that. Figure out what that process is and find out what kind of resonates with you, and have that be something that you kind of look towards, or do the exact opposite of it and really have that contradiction, so you can be like, I don't know if I agree with this guy, but it's opening my mind to other possibilities, because both of those are super valuable. But trying to think of what that process is so it can help you in your process. So with that said, make sure you go out there, give Josh a follow at Fusion FFB. Give me a show at FF the At Home Dad. Give the show a follow at at the Fantasy Facts, and go ahead and check out Fantasy Data whenever you get a chance. FantasyData.com. It is a great time. Josh, any last parting words from you?
I will just say, keep at it, guys. We're in the time of the season where it's a little rough here, but just keep at it. Keep trying to stay ahead of things, like we were saying, and don't be afraid to take some chances, like Gibson.
Yeah. I love taking chances is what it's all about. All right, we are out. Catch you on the flip side.